Everyone has a story about how they found their way into aviation. Some knew from childhood, others stumbled into it by chance, some get referred to it. Here on the channel, we're going to start talking to professionals from every corner of the industry. That's going to be pilots, mechanics, controllers, dispatchers, whatever I can find. We're going to learn what makes them tick and what got them into aviation and what keeps them going. So for today, let's dive into the story. Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Brandon. Obviously, this is GSI Guy. Today's video is a part of an Aviation Conversation Series. This is where I'm going to sit down with aviation professionals from all different backgrounds, whether it be mechanics, pilots, whatever, flight attendants, dispatchers, whatever I can find, to go over each individual background of how they got into aviation so you can hear their different journeys. The goal's simple. I want to inspire people to get into aviation. I want to educate people about how to get into aviation and connect people who love aviation together. So for today, I'm going to make it easy and give you your first guest. Me. I know you guys have been listening to me and watching videos, but I figured why not start off the series with my background and go through this like we will in the future. Okay? So, some of you have been in my classes. Some of you have watched my videos. Some of you know me personally. Some of you don't. And that's perfectly fine, right? So some of you know my background, but you're going to hear it again anyway. So what first sparked my interest in aviation was I don't even remember the exact moment other than it was at an air show. Planes were just freaking cool. Like, they were just cool. I didn't fly at all when I was a kid. Like, we went to Disney one time when I was 5 years old. And that was the extent of me being on an airplane. I got a cool little set of wings. I think they were Delta at the time. I mean, we're talking a certain amount of years ago, so I don't remember it exactly. But I always knew that I wanted to do something in an airplane. I always wanted to fly from the time I could remember. And when I was like 10 years old, I decided I wanted to join the Air Force. I wanted to join the military. My grandparents, my grandpa anyway, on both sides, they were both Army. My uncle was Army. My stepdad was Army. My cousins were Navy. Like, I have a lot of military experience. None of them in aviation, though. And I was like, well, I want to be on an airplane. The best place I can do that's in the Air Force. So I'll join the military. So at 18 years old, or so I guess 16, is when I actually signed my contract and everything. I joined the military. This was back in 2003, I think, is when I actually left. Yeah, 2003, I actually left for the military. And I was going to be a KC-135 boom operator. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically a 707 or a 720 airframe. 4 engines, not real big. It's a narrow body aircraft that refuels other aircraft in flight. I didn't even know we could do that when I went to MEPS, the processing center that you go to before going to the military. I had no idea that was even a job. Didn't know we could even do that. And I remember the reason I chose that job was because they gave me a list of jobs I could do. And the first one they gave me was a flight engineer. And I could be a flight engineer on C5s or KC-10s. And I remember reading the job description and going, that seems like a lot of work. And I don't want to do that. So I went to the next one. The next one was a loadmaster. And that could be on a C-17, a C-5, a C-130. anything that carried cargo. But when I would read the job description, and don't come for me in the comments because I didn't know it at the time, it seemed kind of boring. Like, unless you're airlift qualified or airdrop qualified, it didn't really seem like you did anything in flight. You loaded your pallets, you made sure that everything was strapped down, and you didn't do anything until you landed at the next place where you unloaded the cargo. Which at the time, I mean, I guess that would still be kind of cool because, you know, you didn't have that stuff to do there in the middle. But I come to realize that loadmasters do more than that. So don't come after me or nothing. I know that you guys do a lot. And then I was handed the in-flight refueler. And it was a KC-135R/T in-flight refueling apprentice was the full job. And that just meant you were a 3-level, meant you were an entry-level in-flight refueler. And I remember reading that, and I was like, wow, we can refuel planes in flight. And that's really freaking cool. And my recruiter didn't know anything about the job. I can't remember what he did in the service before he was a recruiter, but it wasn't nothing that had to do with that. And I honestly think that he just went through and he Googled KC-135 pictures and would show me these KC-135 pictures and kind of made it up. And he was like, "Oh, you'll never go in country without a fighter escort, and you'll never do this, you'll never do that." None of it was true. We ended up, I mean, I've spent numerous hours flying over the skies of Iraq and Afghanistan completely by ourselves, with no defense systems, no warning systems, no anything. So it was a rough go there in the beginning where I was like, "Oh, my recruiter, he lied his ass off to me." But that's okay. I understand. I get, you know, that they can't know every job and the ins and outs of every job. So I understand that now. But at the time, I was a little annoyed. But anyway, it was great. I did that for, you know, I did the deployment cycle, and I did 7 or 8 deployments, something like that. I can't really remember. I've got my records buried somewhere, but you know, I did a few deployments, and you know, I got tired of it. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I decided to go to our schoolhouse, and the schoolhouse was in Altus, Oklahoma. If you've ever been to Altus, Oklahoma, it's you understand my excitement when I was like, "Yay, I get to be in Altus." Now, granted, I volunteered for it, but I volunteered for it because I wanted to teach. I wanted to be an instructor for the new guys. So 2009, I go down there, and I'm an instructor down there. And I did that for a little bit, and I did that for 3 years. And then I got out in 2012, right about my 10-year mark. And it was 9 years, 8 months, 20-some days or whatever. Not that I was counting. But that was like the best experience I could have ever had or ever asked for. Now, with that, you know, there was a lot of training and stuff that I had to go through. There was no real certification, really. I mean, you're military, so it's all in-house training, and everything's done via their training programs, and there's no outside certification from the FAA, really. And there's no translation from what I did in there to civilian world, or at least there wasn't. There is now, but there wasn't at the time. So 2012, I get out of the military, and I decide that I didn't really want anything to do with airplanes. I wanted to take a break from airplanes, so I decided to work on cars. I'd always had a passion for working on cars with my dad for a long time. So I went to school for that for a couple years. I get out of doing that and get out of the school, and then go, you know, do some work working on, you know, different vehicles and different jobs in that industry with collision or finishing and things like that, and rebuilding some cars. And I didn't have the same drive to do that as what I did with aviation. So about 3.5 years, 4 years of being removed from aviation, I decided I wanted to go back into aviation. And I got a job at Air Transport International. If you don't know where that is, that's in Wilmington, Ohio. They fly 767s for Amazon, and they do some other stuff with 757s. And it was a really good job. I was a scheduler, which that part wasn't as fun because well, you're a scheduler, and if anybody's ever been a scheduler, you know that it's not the best part of aviation. But it was the puzzles that I really liked. I really liked putting together puzzles, and scheduling every day was a puzzle. It was, how can you get this crew to this airplane, or how can you get this crew to this hotel and make sure it's legal and make sure everybody has the right rest and all that kind of stuff. So it was really interesting. After that, I went from ATI to I went from being a scheduler at ATI to being a ground school instructor for ATI, and there were a couple people that really helped me with that. And I hope they don't mind that I'm putting them on blast. But Rod Ennis was one. He was my director of operations. He was awesome, and the chief pilot we had at the time was Ed Wilson. Both of them awesome people. And if it wasn't for either one of them, I wouldn't be where I am now, as far as being the ground instructor that I am now. So I really appreciate both of those guys, and everything that they gave me and let me do while I was at ATI. Another guy that I can't forget is Steve Capps. Steve Capps was the manager of training at ATI at the time, and he taught me everything that I know about the 7.6. He was just an amazing guy. He was an amazing instructor. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2021. But I mean, he was just awesome. And again, if it wasn't for those three guys, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. I mean, there's a lot of other people along the way. I don't want anybody to think, they're listening to this, well, you didn't mention my name, you didn't say my name. I mean, there's a lot of guys, Steve Parker, Kevin Steyer, John Sullivan. God, I can't name everybody because there's just so many people that I've really enjoyed being around in this industry and in the instructor part of it, and the things that those guys have taught me, and just their overall demeanor of knowledge to the student is the utmost importance, because there's no substitute for it, right? There's no substitute for training, and training leads to safety and all of these kind of things. So those people had a huge influence on my career path, and I can't thank them enough for it. And as well as a numerous amount of other people that I've come in contact with and still in contact with. I love everybody that I've dealt with. Now, for me, coming out of the military, there was no, like I said, there was no certification, so I didn't have like a thing where I could just go take a test and get this certification. I'm still working towards getting my advanced ground instructor. I've got the fundamentals of instruction part done. I'm working towards getting the instructor test completed so I can get that done. But the most challenging part was learning the systems, and that was from the KC-135 all the way through the 7.6, the 7.5, the 7.3. I'm still learning every day when I talk to people. That's the incredible part about this industry, is everybody has so many different experiences, and that's why I want to do this series, is so people can see the different experiences that come along with it. But it was learning the aircraft systems on something that I didn't actually fly. I've had numerous people be so surprised when they're like, "You're not a pilot?" And I'm like, "No, I've just sat and I've learned these systems over and over and over again. And I've studied and I've put the effort in." So that's been the most challenging part of this whole thing, has been learning different aircraft systems without actually getting to get into an airplane and use them. At least on a 135, I got to use some of the stuff that we learned, right? Like, I was responsible for knowing all of the aircraft systems, but I also used the aircraft system. So stuff stuck a little bit better than this did in the beginning for the 7.6. I guess going back and doing things differently, I would probably have left the military, used my GI Bill, started flying, and gotten my ATP so I could be a little bit farther along in my flying career than I am now at 41. I have 45 hours or something like that, 45 or 50 hours on a Cessna. So I'm getting there, but the cost of flying nowadays is ridiculously expensive. But I also have to realize that if I would have done it that way, I wouldn't have met the people that I've met. I wouldn't have met Ed Wilson or Rod Ennis or John Sullivan or Steve Parker or Kevin Steyer or Steve Capps or any of these guys that have had big influences on my aviation career, or even now, with some of the people I work with now, Jim Oswald and those guys. Like I really am so thankful that I get to work with these people and that I get to see these people and talk to these people on a daily, weekly basis, But that's probably the only thing that I would have probably done differently. Would actually have been to use my GI Bill to pay for it versus me having to pay for it. But anyway, we'll move on from there. So I already kind of told you what my first job in aviation was, right? As a 135 boom operator. And once you get into an airplane and you start doing that kind of stuff, aviation people seem to go one of two ways. You either love it for the rest of your life, or you treat it like a job. You do it for as long as you need to, and then you're done. And then you separate yourself from it. I fall onto the side of aviation's going to be probably part of my life for the rest of my life. And I am totally happy with that. I love almost everything about aviation. And I say almost because there are some things that are stressful and kind of a pain. Traveling on civilian airplanes was a change. Not being able to pack my own bags or load my own bags or anything like that, like I used to in the military, that was a change. But outside of that, I mean, aviation will be something that will always be something that's a part of my life. Whether it's doing this kind of stuff, whether it's actually flying, whether it's working with airlines, whether it's working with maintenance, whatever. I'm always going to be open to do those kind of things. Now, where I've gotten now, again, I mentioned, Rod and Ed, and if it wasn't for those guys, I wouldn't be where I am. And that was a big turning point for me, because I always thought, I was like, well, I'm going to be a scheduler, and eventually I'll be like a manager of scheduling, and then kind of move up on the admin side of aviation. That's fine. I mean, there are some people, they're perfectly happy doing that. I wanted to be more involved with the airplanes and more involved with the pilots. And when they gave me the opportunity to try and be a ground instructor, man, I couldn't say yes fast enough. I really couldn't. I love everything about the 7.6. It is just a cool freaking airplane. And I was really happy to learn it and learn from the people I did. Obviously, my role over time has evolved. I started out, I was the fumbling guy in the beginning that was like, every question was asked, it's like, I don't know, let me get back to you. And I'd have to write it down. And let me know, hang on, let me write that down. And obviously, the more you do things, I will 100% say that the best way to learn something is to teach it, because it forces you to learn it. And that's not to say that every instructor started that way. I mean, not everybody does it that way. But the learning curve, once you start teaching something, your knowledge goes up vastly fast compared to not teaching something and just trying to learn it in a book. So I've gone from the bumbling, fumbling guy that couldn't really answer any questions, always had to write it down to look it up, to be the guy that I have pilots reaching out to me from across the world asking me questions about aircraft systems. And I don't do that to boast. I don't do that to be conceited or anything, but that's pretty freaking cool. I never in my life thought that people would actually care enough about what I say or what I know about a subject to be able to call me or text me or email me random questions from across the world. That's just awesome. So going from that into like my day to day, like what my day to day looks like. So if you don't know, GSI guy is my business. That's my company. It's my everything. I say company. It sounds bigger than it is. It's just me. I have some business cards that have my name on them. And outside of that, it's just me. That means I am a contract instructor. So that means I work with other airlines that contract me for my services, whether that is ground instruction, whether that's curriculum development, whether it's training, whatever, anything and everything that I might be qualified to do, I am more than willing to do contract work for. There are a couple drawbacks to that. One of them is you do not have a consistent income. That's the first thing. You hope that you can get one, but you don't have a consistent income. You don't get any benefits from the company that you work for. And you don't get like vacation or anything like that where you get paid while you're not working. If you don't work, you don't get paid, period. Which is why I try and do things like this, because if I can get a following this way and maybe I can make money this way, and then maybe it kind of offset the other stuff, right? That's the hope. Anyway, that's the dream, is to be able to do aviation content here on YouTube and have it help supplement the dry times of the instruction. I'll probably never get away from ground instruction because of how much I enjoy it and how much I love teaching. But only adults. I don't know if I could teach kids. That's a whole nother argument. But so my day-to-day changes depending on what I've got to do. If I'm contracted and I'm doing something for that contract, okay, well, my day may be sitting on a computer and running through PowerPoints. It may be sitting on the computer and creating a course to upload to an LMS, or it may be me traveling to an airline to teach a class, whether it be initial or recurrent or something like that. So it really changes from day to day for me, which is kind of nice. Can be kind of stressful too, but it's nice. I like having that variety. And with that, I mean, obviously the thing I enjoy the most is sitting with students and teaching them and getting that aha moment, that light bulb coming on. Like, you can sit and you can look at a CBT and you can go through the stuff over and over and over again, but you're never going to get to a point. Some people might. I shouldn't say never. Some people will get to a point where it's like, I know what they're talking about, and they can move on and it's perfectly fine. But there's other people that they can read it and look at it and do all this other kind of stuff over and over and over again and not fully understand it until they sit with an instructor and the instructor can explain it to them, or you can get some hands-on stuff in a simulator, or you can see it in an X-Plane or Microsoft Flight Sim or something like that. Then the light bulb comes on and is, oh. And that's probably the most exciting part for me, is when I get somebody to do that and when I get somebody to understand that. And it's like, yes, that's awesome. I love when somebody does that. Now, if you're not in aviation and you don't understand aviation, you probably shouldn't try and assume what people do in aviation, right? So, like, people don't realize when I tell them what I do for a living. Like, people will ask me, hey, what do you do for a living? So, I teach aircraft systems for Boeing 757, 767. They immediately go, oh, so you're a pilot. No, I wish, but no, I'm an instructor of the systems. Well, how can you teach the systems if you don't fly them? Really? You can't understand how that could happen? I don't know. For me, I guess it's because we're in aviation and things like this happen quite often where the instructors aren't always pilots. I mean, I've seen ground instructors that are flight engineers, that are first officers, that are check airmen, but I've also seen where they're people like me. They started off in scheduling and dispatching, and then all of a sudden they transition over to teaching aircraft systems. And some of us just have that kind of knack to be able to pick up that kind of technological stuff, and We just have a way of presenting it where people can understand it. That's the biggest thing. Like you can have all the knowledge in the world in your head. If you can't portray it to a student or to a class, what good is it? It's not any good. I will be the first one to tell you I do not know everything about this airplane. And I will gladly tell you I don't know, but I can find you an answer. I can look it up, or I can try and reach out to other people to get answers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But being a good instructor, to me, isn't knowing everything. And I know everybody's groaning because you're probably saying what I'm about to say. It's not knowing everything. It's knowing where to find it. And that's the way it is. If you don't know where to find the information, the shit doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you can't back up what you're saying, right? Like you could sit there and say, well, the contrails on a 7.6 are made of unicorns and rainbows. And you could have all the confidence in the world that that's correct. But if you can't show me in a book, or you can't show me in something that Boeing has produced, it doesn't even have to be your own company's book. If it's something that Boeing has produced and says it, I'll believe it. But, I mean, let's get real here. You got to be able to back up your information. And not just say, because I said so. And I think that's been the hardest thing for me to learn, because military teaching is way different than civilian teaching. Military teaching, you could use fear, sarcasm, and ridicule for the most part, because that's just how it was. And I can still use sarcasm. I still use sarcasm quite a bit. Ridicule, a little bit, but it's all in fun. Like, it's, I have students rip me, I rip them. It's a back and forth thing. It's funny. I don't do it as a making fun of bullying kind of thing. Like, that's not, you don't want to take it to that level, right? But I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that people don't understand that aren't in this industry is me teaching somebody that has thousands of hours flying airplanes, but they don't have any experience flying the 7.6. So I have to be able to convey to them that I am competent. I know what I'm talking about, and that they need to listen to me, even though I only have 45 or 50 hours in a Cessna 172, by the way. So I don't know. That, to me, that's probably the biggest challenge. Now, the other part of this is that's my life. That's my education. It's my background. That's my career path, right? Let's talk about aviation as we see it going in the future, right? So there's a couple different things. First thing is this aviation, being in aviation is not what I imagined aviation to be. Sometimes there's a lot of like glamour stuff that comes along with aviation. Oh, you get paid all this money, and you get all. I always thought, I was like, man, they're gonna have the best IT stuff, and they're gonna have, and by IT stuff I mean like software programs, and they're gonna have this, and they're gonna have that, and they're gonna have this. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I absolutely wrong. I mean, there was definitely a jump from where I was in the military. The programs we used in the military were still MS-DOS based, and I'm not that damn old. But, they were antiquated, to say the least. And then, so there was a jump going from there to the civilian side. But even they have issues because there's so many variables when it comes to flying. There's so many variables between airplanes and between operations, and whether you're 121 or 135 or 91, it's almost impossible to make a software suite that works for everybody perfectly. So yeah, there's a little bit of misconstrued there, I think, with the reality of what aviation is and the stuff people have to deal with. And when you look at things like, what was it, American Airlines, was it American, that had to shut down a bunch of flights one day, or Southwest that had to shut down a bunch of flights one day because of a computer glitch, I can absolutely see where that would happen. And it stems all from software, and it stems from stuff either being outdated, or, it's meant to work with, this operation, but we can make it work with this operation with a couple caveats. So I mean, there's always something that could probably trip you up, and it's one of those things where, um, yeah, I don't think if you're unless you're in aviation, you don't notice it, and you're kind of detached from that reality of what aviation is. Everybody just seems to think that there's always this perfect flight that goes from this state or this airport to this airport, and I should just be able to book at any time and the airplane would just go. And it's like, well, no, that's a different type of thing. That's private charters. That's not, a legacy carrier and all that kind of stuff. I think people have a completely different reality in their head of what aviation is. And the industry has changed quite a bit, like from being, with a carrier that was a small carrier that became a mid-sized carrier, a bigger carrier. I don't want to say big carrier, because if you're under 100 airplanes, I don't think you're really considered to be a big carrier, but you're a big or small carrier. That makes sense. The definitions kind of get blurry when you start adding airplanes and start getting bigger. And it's not necessarily, I mean, the industry has kind of changed in a way. For me, it hasn't probably changed as much as what it has for people that have been flying for 25, 30, 35, 40 years. Um, for me, it's been more along the lines of just the companies I work for change because they grow. They get more pilots. And then you go from knowing everybody's name to, who are you again? Like, I'm sorry, I know I had you in class, but you see 3, 4, 5, 600 people a year, and you get a little distracted of what everybody's name is. It's pretty easy to remember Brandon, right? Like it's easy to remember just my name, but me trying to remember 600 people's other names, I think that's where it gets a little more difficult. But what we've noticed over the last year and a half is the fear in aviation. I think that's something that we need to try and get away from. That's something we need to try and fix. Statistically, flying is still the safest way of travel. Statistically. Now, does that make it any easier to watch disasters that happen on TV? Like the, Air India disaster, or the Reagan incident? No, because it's lives lost, and it's a terrible, terrible tragedy when those kind of things happen. But to look at it and to fearmonger aviation, like some people have, or some people do, or the media kind of does sometimes, not because they're trying to, I don't think. I think they're just trying to report the story, and it's just kind of what happens in people's heads. But the fear-mongering of flying, I think, is the biggest change I've seen since I've started in aviation. And there's also been kind of a change where it was like, years ago, oh, you're a pilot. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, da-da-da-da-da. And that's still that way for a lot of people. Like, there's still a lot of people that are like, man, being a pilot's so awesome. But you go, just look through the airports now. You have people in an airport that look like they should be shopping at Walmart at 2 in the morning. I don't necessarily like that. You want to wear that? That's fine, I guess, if you want to be in public that way. But now flying has gotten to a point where everybody can do it. Like, everybody can afford it, is what I mean. Because let's face it here, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, hell, even the 90s, there were no low-cost carriers, really. And to fly was a privilege, not a right. And now everybody seems to treat it the opposite. They tend to treat it like it's a right for them to be on the airplane, that they can do certain things on the airplane and not get in trouble for it, and stupid things like that. And I think, again, that's a misunderstanding of aviation, the reality of aviation, how serious we take safety and security in aviation today. I mean, let's think about the next 5-10 years, right? So you've got the 7.6 is going to be basically, their what you call it, their line is stopping, right? They're no longer going to be building the 7.6s anymore. That's sad for me. I mean, I know the 7.6s are going to be around for a long time. I'm not saying that they're going to just disappear in the next 5 or 10 years. But now it's, well, what's the next thing, right? Airbus is pushing, seem to be pushing real hard for that single pilot cockpit, which I'm sorry if you are in agreement with a single pilot flight deck. We're never going to see eye to eye on that, ever. There is no amount of technology in my mind that will make it okay for one pilot to go away from the flight deck, especially when we're talking about physiological needs and we're talking about, the possibility of incapacitation and the possibility of automation failing. You'll never be able to convince me that one pilot is safer than two or as safe as two. But I can see there being a much harder push over the next 5 to 10 years to reduce the number of pilots. That there will be a larger jump in automated flying aircraft, drones. That's not to say that, pilots as we know it are going away. That's not at all. I just think there's going to be more of a push for it. Different types of fuels. I've seen concepts for hydrogen airplanes and electric airplanes and all that kind of stuff. And it's great if you can make them work, and you can make them work the way they need to and not be ridiculously expensive. And aviation is what it is. Sometimes there comes a trade-off with what you're doing, right? To be able to fly, you have to be able to do certain things. And one of those is you need jet fuel and you need jet engines. And it is what it is. And that kind of goes back to another thing, I guess, that has changed in the industry. And that's been the number of conspiracy theorists that come along with it. I'm not saying all conspiracy theories are crazy, but I'm also not saying that all conspiracy theories are true. Because, like the whole chemtrail thing, the whole mind control stuff, the making it rain and flood in certain areas, and I can't. I've been in aviation for too long to remotely give any credit to any of those. But you've just seen an increase in the number of people that believe the stuff, I think, is kind of what I'm getting at. And that's fine. I mean, if you want to believe that stuff, I just don't ever want you in charge of legislation or anything that way. But I don't know. If aviation is ever anything that you've wanted to get into, or that you've ever wanted to start out in, unless you are going through a program to fly, like unless you're going to be a pilot and you have that drive to be a pilot and that's what you want to do, I don't want to say the easiest, because it's not easy, but one of the foot in the door kind of jobs that you can get for an airline to get into aviation and understand the operation and how it works, and it's usually used as a stepping stone to go to other things, is scheduling. Find a flight scheduler job, do that for a little bit, understand the operation, and then you can move into these different areas of the airlines. It's not always easy, but I mean, that's your way in, honestly. Internships, any kind of internships, things like that can always get you into the airlines and into aviation in general, and can lead to really great things. And then I'll kind of end it on this. One piece of information I wish that I would have had before getting into aviation pilots have the best seat in the house when it comes to their job. And to me, in my opinion, flying the airplane is the most incredible thing that you can do for a career. And I know there's a lot of other really cool things, so please, this is obviously aviation is my love. That's what it is. So that's what I'm gonna think. But I really wish somebody would have explained to me the cost that it would take to become a pilot. The amount of time, the amount of money that is required to become a pilot, in my opinion now, has gotten to a point where unless you have help or you take on debt or you're lucky enough to get some of these scholarships or you're in a family where somebody can teach you how to fly, or you have friends that can teach you how to fly for cheap or free, it's almost to the point now where a normal person that's just getting into it that wants to try and fly isn't able to. Like they just aren't able to. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I would love to be wrong because I would love to finish out my ratings. But boy, you gotta love that. Every time I get into a good conversation with myself, I get a phone call. So I apologize for that. So we're going to pick up. I'm going to try and pick up kind of where I left off. Anyway, here in Pennsylvania, looking at the flight schools that are around me, you're looking anywhere between $120 to $150 an hour for a dry airplane per hour, 110 to 150. Plus your instructor, if you need an instructor, in which in this case I do. I haven't flown 3 or 4 years now. So, it's $55 an hour on average. So you're looking anywhere $165 to $205, $210 an hour now. Not to mention, if you need any type of ground school. Not to mention if you need, I don't. You're talking a 2 or 3 hour flight is $600-$700. That's a lot for people now. And I get that aviation's expensive. Everything in aviation is expensive. A freaking switch in the cockpit costs $80,000. I get that. But damn, man, if there was a way to make it more see, this is where being a redneck from Southern Ohio doesn't help me. Being able to make it easier to enter the industry as a pilot, or have more programs in airlines to help the people that work for them, sponsorships, or scholarships, or just random programs to where they were able to bring their own pilots up through their ranks. Like you have a scheduler for somebody that just has a passion for aviation. They really want to fly, but they can't afford on, the salary that they have, and they're providing for a family and they're doing all this other stuff. They're not able to afford the money to put towards flying. If an airline had a 142 school or something like that attached to them, that had little airplanes, that you had instructors and whatever else, that once your student got to the point where they could be a CFI, they become a CFI, then they get their 1500, then they get their ATP, and then they could be a pilot for you in your airline, and you organically grow your people. By the time they actually get to an ATP point where they're flying your big airplanes, damn, they should know your operation inside and out, versus somebody coming from the outside and having to learn it all, right? I don't know. That's just my things. I'm not in any kind of position to tell anybody that they're doing things right or wrong. I'm just saying it would be really nice, and that's kind of self-serving for me, because I would really like to get into one of those kind of programs and learn how to fly and finish my stuff on how to fly and do that for a living. I'd really love to do that. I know that that's incredibly difficult. I know that it's incredibly expensive for airlines to do. So for now, I'll just get used to talking to you guys about airplanes and your different careers and things like that. And I still enjoy that. Don't get me wrong. I love doing this, but I don't know. That's where I'll leave it. Right. We can always talk about it later. We can always have other conversations about this later on. Again, thank you so much for coming here and being a part of the channel and liking, subscribing, sharing everything that comes up. I really appreciate anybody who comes on here and wants to share their aviation journey. We're going to have a couple, 2, 3 videos come out of other people from other airlines that are going to come in and kind of talk to us, and that should be good. Every story is going to add a little bit bigger picture of how diverse aviation is and how diverse your background can be and the path that you took to get where you are. So if you enjoyed this conversation I had with myself and you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell so you don't miss any future episodes of the Aviation Conversation Series. And if you're an aviation professional that is willing to tell your story about how you got where you are, then you can reach out to me at brandon@gsi-guy.com. I'd love to have you on an episode of this and just sit and have a conversation with you. Until then, remember, my name is Brandon, and I'll see you the next time. Bye, guys.